our panelists and for all the attendants for joining today and making time. Today's webinar, we'll be talking about from participation to partnerships, strengthening youth and civil society roles in the Future Science Policy Panel. So my name is Ankun. I am a member of the Chemicals, Waste and Pollution Working Group at the Children and Youth Major Group to UNEP, and I'll be moderating today's session. And the objective of today's session is really to, as the negotiation process is progressing towards the establishment of the Science Policy Panel on the sound management of chemicals and waste and to prevent pollution, we wanted this webinar to serve as an opportunity to reflect on the progress that we've made so far, and particularly focus on how we can go forward with increasing inclusive and meaningful youth engagement and engagement of civil society in general. And so we'll talk a little bit about the recap of how the negotiation process has been proceeding so far, and then look into the future and see how engagements can improve in the establishment of the Science Policy Panel. And today we really have a star-studded list of speakers, many speakers. So, and we have different sections of the webinar today. So as we proceed through the section, I will introduce our speakers one by one. But here on the slides, you can see overall that we have 11 speakers in total, 12 including me. So you really get a perspective from each different sector and each different body who is a part of this negotiation process. And hopefully we'll have some time at the end for some questions. So I would like to ask all of our panelists to please keep within your time limit as you are speaking so we can have this Q&A session at the end. So to start things off, to host the opening of the session, we have 3 speakers, and I would first like to welcome Goody Alchemida, Chair of the Bureau of the Ad Hoc Open-Ended Working Group on a Science Policy Panel to contribute to the further sound management of chemicals and waste and to prevent pollution. So Goody, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm just testing to see whether you can hear me. Can you confirm?
Yes, we can hear you.
Super. So I basically just entered the meeting, at least in terms of sound, when you announced my introduction. So apologies for the technical hiccup. But let me first start with thanking you, the Children and Youth Major Group, but I think in general the whole group, for inviting me to this meeting and the opportunity to speak. Just to know that the role of stakeholders in general, but I would say from my part, in particular, children and youth in shaping environmental governance is both important but also inspiring, and I would encourage you to continue on this journey. Maybe just to say that guided by the mandate of the UNEP resolution to work on proposals for the establishment of a science policy panel to contribute further to the sound management of chemicals and waste and to prevent pollution in the past few months, or maybe I should say 2 years, quite some efforts have been made to reach out to engage a broader range of stakeholders in our process, including from the health sector and scientists, but also from a broad range of stakeholders. And I do believe that the growing number of participants, and I see that quite a few of them are engaged in this meeting, is both exemplary for these efforts and the support from the Bureau as well as the working group, as well as showing the potential relevance of the science policy that we aim to establish. As you know, chemicals and waste and pollution lie at the heart of many challenges, including the triple planetary crisis. And this reinforces the urgent need for science-based action and for the establishment of a panel that can provide relevant scientific inputs to allow informed policy decisions to be made and actions to be taken. As you are also aware, we are preparing right now for the last meeting of the open-ended working group, and we aim to lay the foundations for the panel. Based on the significant progress in preparing the proposals for the panel, including on its institutional setup, the scope and the functions of the panel. And we have also agreed that at this meeting or in our process, we will finalize also the rules of procedure for the panel to start its work. And from my outreach to date, I'm optimistic that we can achieve our aim and finalize the process for the intergovernmental meeting that will be held back-to-back to establish the panel. If we all can focus on the key elements to set the foundations right. And your input will be valuable. And I will promise to continue to make efforts for the open-ended working group to maintain its inclusiveness and transparency in its approach, as we have been doing in the past meetings. And I believe that the openness of our process enhances both the legitimacy, sorry, I'm struggling with the word, but also with the impact of the panel looking forward. We have all the elements on the table, and I'm confident that we can find solutions to the outstanding issues where the views of member states are at the moment still different. And that we can look forward to a future panel that can build on a strong foundation. I'm grateful for the time that you have made to have your own consultations, and I hope that these can be fruitful and continue to support the process of the open-ended working group, and also to provide useful inputs in the discussions. And once the panel is established, let's make sure that this inclusivity will be maintained, and that the panel's work can contribute to science-based policies that are both relevant and impactful. And I hope that we can continue to work together and all contribute to a healthier, more sustainable future for all of us. Thank you very much, and I would wish you luck with the remainder of the meeting, and wish you fruitful consultations and preparations for the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Goody, for stepping right in and also for expressing that commitment to openness, and for those opening words. And for the next opening words, I'll pass it over to Tessa Hovers, the Principal Coordinator of the Secretariat of the Ad Hoc Open-Ended Working Group on the Science Policy Panel to prevent, for the sound mandatory chemicals waste and to prevent pollution. Tessa, take it away.
Thank you very much, Ankoon, and thank you to the Children's and Youth Major Group for inviting us to provide an update on the recent developments and preparations ahead of OEWG 3.2. and a good day to everyone who's joining today. First, I really would like to commend the very proactive and constructive role that you have been playing in the SPP process. It is really important to have this collaborative spirit in the process, and we hope to continue seeing this as we move forward and hopefully draw the work of the open-ended working group to a close and start a new chapter where by the delivery of the panel will be central. So I think there is a lot to be said. I look forward to hearing also from you and your insights. Some of you are scientists, others may move in the different parts of civil society. And some of you are perhaps also into or moving into policy positions. So there are very many ways in which participation and also partnerships could involve. But for now, we need to first establish the panel and be mindful that the panel can also be further improved over time. So as mentioned by the chair, the open-ended working group has so far made significant progress in preparing proposals for the science policy panel. And we are so far optimistic, but we're not yet there. And we need to really finalize on the foundational elements of the panel from where it can then further grow and develop. So I'm pleased that in this introductory section, I'm able to give you a brief update on the ad hoc open-ended working group's work. In short, we will be referring to the OEWG. And perhaps we can move to the first slide. So the OEWG process started, as many of you know, in March 2022 with the adoption of UNEA Resolution 5/8. The resolution decided that a science policy panel should be established to contribute further to the sound management of chemicals and waste and to prevent pollution. It also decided that an ad hoc open-ended working group would be convened to begin its work in 2022 with the ambition of completing it by the end of 2024, and that this ad hoc open-ended working group would prepare proposals for the science policy panel, considering a range of issues spelled out in the resolution. The resolution also requests UNEP's executive director, upon completion of the proposals prepared by the ad hoc open-ended working group, to convene an intergovernmental meeting for the purpose of considering the establishment of a science policy panel. Next slide, please. The open-ended working group met in Geneva in June 2024 for its third session. And as it was unable to complete its work at the time, it agreed that a resumed third session would be held back-to-back with the intergovernmental meeting, with a view of finalizing the foundational document, the draft rules of procedure, and the draft decisions. So the key documents for negotiation at OEWG 3.2 are what we call the foundational document, with its sections on scope, objective and functions, operating principles and approaches, institutional arrangements and evaluation, and the draft rules of procedure for the governing body of the panel. The outcome of OEWG 3.1 will thus form the basis for the resumed negotiations, and they have been directly forwarded from OEWG 3.1 to OEWG 3.2. The expected outcome of the resumed third session is that these two documents, the foundational document and the draft rules of procedure, would be finalized alongside the related decisions for the intergovernmental meeting to consider, that would then eventually lead to the establishment of the panel and forwarding of the other work of the open-ended working group to the panel itself. Next slide, please. OEWG 3.2 will take place at the Convention and Exhibition Center in Punta del Este from 15th to 18th of June. The resumed session will be preceded by informal regional and stakeholder consultations on the 14th of June, and followed by the intergovernmental meeting on the 19th and 20th of June, held at the same venue. The government of Uruguay is hosting the meeting, and we thank them for that. As some of you may know, back-to-back with the SPP meetings, the Global Framework on Chemicals will have its open-ended working group. Back to the open-ended working group for the SPP and the intergovernmental meeting. Further details can be found on our website. And I particularly also would like to point to the webinars and the briefings that the Secretariat has continued to organize since OEWG 3.1. Most of them are recorded and can be found online. I also would like to mention that in 2 days' time, there will be a pre-session briefing that will be organized by the Secretariat on the 29th of May, prior to the start of OEWG 3.2. So mindful of this being an introductory section to your webinar, I will keep my information limited, but welcome you to join the briefing on the 29th of May as well. Then next slide, please. In summary, the focus of OEWG 3.2 will be on these two key working documents, the foundational document and the draft rules of procedure and their related decisions. All of these are highlighted in black on this slide, but also mindful that what not will be on the table are the documents that are grayed out on the slide. So it's proposed that these draft procedures and policies that the OEWG has been considering will directly be forwarded for further consideration by the panel itself at its first session of its governing body, so that they will be forwarded as is, as they current are. Please note finally that the financial procedures were not considered at OEWG 3.1, and it was agreed that these would be forwarded to OEWG 3.2 as an information document only. Next slide. In terms of the consideration of the work at OEWG 3.2, this slide is showing the current thinking around the clustering of the key topics. And this is further elaborated in the scenario note by the chair, which you can also find online at our website together with all other documentation for the meeting. The first cluster would be looking at the key bodies of the panel, their operation and related rules of procedure. The second cluster would look at the other elements of the foundational document and the decision to establish the panel. So basically it's considering those parts of the foundational document that are not considered in the first cluster, which will equate to contact group 1. And then a third cluster that would consider the other rules of procedure and the related decision on the other rules and policies, as well as the decision on interim arrangements. So again, I would point to the scenario note if you're interested in reading more about the proposed approach during the meeting and further elaboration on the clustering of these topics in the 3 proposed contact groups. Next slide, please. The 2022 roadmap leading to OEWG 3.2 and hopefully ultimately to the establishment of the panel looks as follows. The information, webinars and events displayed in gray here have continuously been taking place also this calendar year, and one more is being planned on the 29th, which will be a pre-session briefing for OEWG 3.2. Also marked here in blue are the information, regional and stakeholder consultations. The ones that are coming up are the ones that will take place in person in Punta del Este. But we have had a series of regional meetings as well as briefings in the past months. OEWG 3.2 will then take place from the 15th to the 18th of June, back to back with the intergovernmental meeting convened by the UNEP's executive director on the 19th and the 20th of June. And then finally, at the right side of the timeline, you see with a dotted line and penciled in a first session of the governing body of the panel itself, which obviously can only be scheduled once the panel has been established. So with that, thank you so much for your attention. And I look forward to learning more from you during this webinar. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Tessa, for that very foundational information. And we look forward to the resumed session. I will hand over the floor next to Maria Arhans, the Stakeholder Engagement Specialist of the Civil Society Unit at UNEP. Maria?
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Ankun, and just wanted to wish everyone a very warm welcome to this webinar. I don't want to say much, but as the Civil Society Unit representative today, our mandate is really to support you as civil society to meaningfully participate in environmental governance. And this potential future science policy panel is an excellent opportunity for you to do exactly that, because we do believe that civil society and youth in particular, you're not just participants in this process, but you can be true change makers. Through bringing your knowledge, your lived experiences, and the innovative solutions you bring to the table, you're essential in building a science policy panel that is not only effective, but also inclusive, transparent, and grounded in the realities that we see in the world. So as we move towards the open-ended working group in Punta del Este, this webinar is really an opportunity for you to reflect, to connect, and to co-create. So we encourage you to bring these ideas to the decision makers. And I just want to thank you for your commitment, your energy, and your ideas. And I also look forward to learning from all of you today. So thank you so much, and let's get started.
Yes, indeed. Thanks so much, Maria. And for the last set of opening words, I'll hand it over to Natalia Morovchaniska, one of the two global coordinators of the Children and Youth Major Group to UNEP. Natalia?
So much, and welcome everyone. Hello, great to see so many participants. Before diving in, I just wanted to thank Goody and the Bureau for their continuous support and for providing space for youth and stakeholder participation in this process. Also, a big thank you to the SPP Secretariat and the UNEP Civil Society Unit for facilitating this engagement and their ongoing support. And also to the Geneva Youth Environment Network, of course, for facilitating this webinar and supporting the organization. And of course, a big shout out to our amazing CYMG team who has made this event possible. Thank you so much. I will try to be brief. The purpose of this section is to provide a brief introduction to CYMG, but I know we're already looking forward to the discussion, so I'll try to be as concise as possible. And we can go to the next page. Okay, it's a little bit cut off, I can see, but maybe we can manage for now. Otherwise, I can share from my laptop. But basically, CYMG is the formal youth engagement mechanism to UNEP. We represent over 1,500 organizations, 64 of which are formally accredited to UNEP. And we have almost 10,000 individual members from over 100 countries. Our mission is to advance the empowerment, inclusion, and meaningful engagement of youth in global environmental governance. And next page. Still slight formatting challenges, but I can talk through it. So when it comes to our theory of change, it relies on three main avenues. So that's firstly capacity building, so developing the skills and building the knowledge of young people to ensure they can effectively engage in environmental governance processes. Secondly, it's policy advocacy, so actually building positions and practically engaging in negotiations to make sure we make those changes happen and amplify youth voices and advocate for intergenerational justice effectively. And finally, expanding access to make sure that young people are actually on the ground where important decisions regarding environmental policy and governance are being made. And on the right-hand side, you can just see a few examples of some of the activities under those buckets. We can move to the next page. Perfect. And when it comes to the processes we engage in as CYMG, Annually, we provide input into approximately 30 processes, and we can split them at the high level into 3 main buckets. So firstly, that the UN Environment Assembly and core processes. UNEA is, of course, the world's highest level environmental governance body, and its agenda is set by the Committee of Permanent Representatives, both of which we provide input into. We also have the UNEP administered multilateral environmental agreements and scientific assessments. So, of course, the potential panel, science policy panel would fall under this category. Also IPCC, IRP, Montreal Protocol, etc. And lastly, UNEP facilitated initiatives and partnerships. So again, quite a few different potential initiatives, but for example, the UN Environment Management Group and the UNEP Finance Initiative. And we can go to the next page. Okay, and this is just, I'm not going to go into the details, but just to flash some of the key working groups that are making this engagement throughout all of those processes possible. So we have 13 thematic working groups and 8 regional working groups. We can go to the next slide. So you can just see the scope of our work thematically and regionally. Yeah, we can go to the next page as well. And no need to pause too much. So just to briefly summarize our impact in numbers, you can see some of the key headline figures, but for example, we provided input into all of the UNEA 6 resolutions. We also supported over 200 delegates to participate in international environmental conferences. That includes UNEA, of course. We gathered over 450 people during the Youth Environment Assembly, and you can see some of the other headline numbers. Won't pause too much. We can go to the next page. And just super briefly summarizing our achievements in 2024. So when it comes to the UNEA 6, we raised over $180,000 to support 150 youth delegates to take part in meetings. We also organized the second Global Youth Environment Assembly, which welcomed more than 300 delegates. We engaged in multiple ongoing processes, continuing our engagement in those initiatives. That includes the plastic treaty negotiations, the regional meetings on the SVP, of course, the UNEP working group on nitrogen, and many other processes. And we also engaged in some first-time initiatives, which includes, for example, the Montreal Protocol COP26, the International Resources Panel, the Summit of the Future, and for organizing the youth forum on the sidelines of the summit, and also working with the One Planet Network Forum. And next page, please. Yes, so this is just a summary of our roadmap for this year. This is a really high-level summary because if you have subscribed to CYMG mailing list or you follow us on social media, you can see that there is a lot that we organize and many activities that we hold every single week. But at the high level, these are some of the key processes that we're looking forward to in 2025. And of course, you can see the row here on chemicals and waste. And we can go to the next page. And just super briefly, our overarching work, in addition to the thematic and regional activities, is informed by 4 strategic objectives that we set as a constituency at the beginning of this year. So that includes, firstly, increasing the number and engagement of accredited organizations, especially in underrepresented regions. Secondly, ensuring more proactive and effective position building. Thirdly, scaling capacity building and strengthening accessibility and inclusion. And lastly, building a more transparent, adaptable, and effective governance structure. So this is really informing how we operate as a constituency and how we hope to structure our engagement. And next page, please. And lastly, if you are interested in getting more involved in CYMG or you haven't had the opportunity to follow our work yet, there's a few main avenues through which you can do that. So firstly, please, if you're eligible or able to and interested, please sign up to the constituency and stay up to date. You can do that for joining our mailing list, our constituency calls, and following our social media. If you are more interested in actively contributing to the processes and providing input, you can provide ad hoc input via the various calls that we announce. This is normally done via email as well as sometimes on social media. If you want to be even more active, you could join project teams and task forces to contribute to the organizational side. And finally, for those interested in contributing further to CYMG, you can take up formal roles within what we call the CYMG Secretariat, which would comprise our operations team and our global steering committee. And with that, thank you so much. Thank you again for everyone to everyone for making this event happen, and good luck for the rest of the discussion.
Thanks so much, Natalia. And we'll head on right over to present the youth priorities engagements with the future panel, and that will be presented by Olga Skaridina, the Science Policy Thematic Facilitator at CYMG. Olga?
Thank you, Ankun, for the introduction, and it's my pleasure to present youth priorities and our engagement with the Science Policy Panel. If you go to the next slide, then I would like to highlight that throughout the SPP process, CYMG has maintained consistent, evolving, and strategic engagement. We began with strong on-the-ground participation at WEG in Bangkok, closely following negotiations, delivering opening and closing statements, and also contributing to contact groups. And as it has been reiterated multiple times, here is special thank you to the Secretariat and the civil society unit for fostering this process that welcomes civil society perspectives. And then moving forward to WEG in Nairobi and Geneva, our engagement expanded to include written submissions, virtual consultations with young people, regional consultations as part of the preparatory process, and the growing social media presence. Our approach, our engagement has been iterative, and it involved continuous learning from each session. And over time, we've grown in both visibility and credibility, ensuring that youth voices are present and also heard. And as a result, our contributions have been consistently reflected in the official outcome documents, from our earlier calls for the youth advisory body and to the calls for intergenerational equity and meaningful youth engagement. And if we go to the next slide, then you can see that as part of our broader engagement, we have been advocating for youth priorities, which have been developed through virtual consultations with young people across different regions and across different disciplines. And just recently, we've concluded 2 such consultations, gathering over 100 young people deeply engaged in this SPP process. And at the core of our priorities is the call to prioritize intergenerational equity as one of the operating principles, because we believe that ensuring this intergenerational equity will ensure that the panel structure and work will incorporate intergenerational perspectives and foster active engagement of children and young people. We also propose the institutionalization of the Youth Expert Advisory Group to integrate the voices of youth experts and early career professionals in the panel's work program. And later today, we will hear the perspectives of these youth fellows of why it is important to engage young people. And we also emphasize the need for a flexible and iterative approach to the operation of the panel, so that the panel allows for continuous learning, timely integration of new evidence, and responsiveness to emerging technologies, societal trends, and evolving social dynamics. If we move to the next slide, then you'll see that the rest of our priorities, and here I would like to highlight capacity building as a way to ensure long-term inclusive capacity development that empowers diverse stakeholders, not just member states, but diverse stakeholders to meaningfully engage in the panel's work. And capacity building efforts, they should be holistic, incorporate intergenerational learning, and also be responsive to regional needs, linguistic diversity, and bottom-up knowledge systems. And we also emphasize and propose adaptive outreach and awareness-raising mechanisms to communicate findings in a way that are accessible, multilingual, and relevant to diverse audiences. And here we did our research and we like the practices of EPAS and IPCC and GEO and Envision youth summaries and open access materials that can support local knowledge uptake and action. If you go to the next slide, then you can see a snapshot into our textual proposals and general comments on the foundational documents that we have submitted to the Secretariat for further circulation, and which are available on our website and will be available on their OEWG website as well. So generally, we appreciate the efforts made to structure the future panel in an inclusive and interdisciplinary manner. But at the same time, we see the opportunity to strengthen further the text. And especially, this strengthening could be through ensuring that intergenerational equity is more consistently mainstreamed and that youth engagement mechanisms are more clearly articulated. We also suggest enhancing language on civil society participation. While observer roles are acknowledged and we are appreciative of that, we also believe that more specific references to groups such as youth, indigenous peoples, women, informal workers would help reinforce the panel's commitment to inclusivity and representation. Also, we kind of noticed that early career professionals and youth have not yet been explicitly addressed in the draft rules of procedure. And while we understand that stakeholder engagement mechanism will be developed during the first plenary session or even later, still including language at this stage would signal early support for inclusive and participatory modalities. And finally, we note the value of integrating youth-specific fellowships and knowledge-sharing initiatives to build sustained capacity and long-term engagement in the panel's work. And if we move to the next slide, then you will see our proposals for meaningful youth engagement. Here, I would, for the interest of time, I will just highlight the importance of establishing a youth expert advisory group as a subcommittee under the interdisciplinary expert committee, as an opportunity for early career professionals to provide structures and consistent input, and also help shape research priorities, policy recommendations, and outreach strategies, which will also, in its turn, help promote co-creation, capacity building, and knowledge exchange with senior experts. We also highlight that other panels have their own practices of engaging with early career researchers, which is fellowship programs as part of the IPCC work, PhD scholarship programs also as part of IPCC work, fellowship programs also refer to GEO and EBAS, and early youth-friendly deliverables and outreach as part of GEO practice. So we highlight the importance of engaging early career scholars in the work and operationalization of the panel, and their purpose of today's webinar is to highlight their importance of their contributions. I will stop here, and if you can go to the next slide, you can scan the QR code to access our submission, or you can follow the link to read our youth priorities. Thank you, and I look forward to the next session.
Thank you so much, Olga, for presenting the priorities. And I hope everyone has a chance to look them thoroughly in their own time. And we're now heading over to the third part of today's webinar, which is perspectives and voices from civil society toward inclusive and meaningful engagement with the Science Policy Panel. So we have 3 speakers for this section. Each speaker will have about 5 to 7 minutes each to present on a recap of the negotiation processes so far, key priorities for this upcoming resume session in June, and general outlook on engagement with the future SPP once it is established. So for our first speaker, I will hand it over to Camilla Alexander-White, who is the lead policy advisor at the Royal Society of Chemistry and the Science Technology Major Group Facilitator to UNEP.
Thank you. I hope you can see my video. I have no slides for today, so I'm just going to go through a few things over the next 5 minutes. Thanks to the Children and Youth Major Group for inviting me here today. I've been involved in all of the meetings for the Science Policy Panel so far, firstly in Bangkok, then Nairobi and Geneva. And all of them really, the role of civil society there, I think it's been quite a positive atmosphere compared to some of the feedback that I have from some of the other meetings. And I hope that continues again as we go into Uruguay. The Science and Technology Major Group have had quite a leading role in bringing civil society together at these meetings for the SPP. And as mentioned just then, last week I had the privilege of being elected to work alongside Dr. Mohammed Abdul Rauf as the Science and Technology Major Group facilitator to the Major Group facilitator to committee. So in that role now, I hope to really learn from you in the Children and Youth Major Group, because I think from observing you all at the 3 or 4 meetings I've been to on the Science Policy Panel, you're working brilliantly well together, and you're using the technology that's available to you to bring people together from all around the world to be able to share perspectives. And the models that you have, the thematic models, and also the constituency model, is something that I think some of the other major groups could learn from. And we will try and do that in the Science and Technology Major Group going forward. There's about 90 UN accredited organisations in the Science and Technology Major Group, and around 12 of those have routinely participated in the Science Policy Panel. But as the name suggests, for this particular set of negotiations, scientists are really key to be able to try and advise and inform on how such a panel might actually work and how it might be successful in its delivery. So in that sense, we look at the legal text. We'll be having some conversations around the legal text between now and the meeting in Uruguay. We'll also have that day as well, or certainly half a day, on the afternoon of the 14th of June, when those of us who are in Uruguay are together. We'll be able to look at where things currently stand. Thank you to Tessa for presenting the logistics and the information that we need to go into those meetings. On the 14th, we'll look and see what the absolute priorities are for us going forward. I really like the Children and Youth priority list there as well. It's a great set of priorities. Then in the meeting itself in Uruguay, we really need to pare down to the absolute essentials as we try and support and facilitate the governments to really get the foundational documents and the rules of procedure finalised. There might be some simplification needed for that. But at the same time, we don't want to be written out. So I think as a civil society mission and a message, it's about looking at the legal text as things evolve during the week, just to make sure that there's an open door for us to still be involved to the maximum potential that we can be going forward. So far, it is in there, and there's more detail in the rules of procedure documents than there is in the foundational text. There's still quite a bit of bracketed text. So a priority that we've been looking at from the science and technology side of things is to maintain involvement and participation as much as possible. Notably, not to the detriment of the actual agreement being decided. That wouldn't be a win, but to actually have the text in the final documents of the foundational document and the rules of procedure that leave the doors open to us to be able to speak and participate and inform. One of the other messages, I think you captured most of the things in your 10 priorities on the slides, on the children and major group slides. Just to add to those as well, there's the point from the science and technology side about being a multidisciplinary committee. The area of chemicals and waste and pollution in particular arguably more so than climate change and biodiversity, but it's still true there too, is that you really need multidisciplinarians to make it work, so that really you know what the solutions are, you know what the technologies are that are on the horizon that could actually work. So we look at the governing body, obviously, and respect the governing body being an intergovernmental process and that there are government representatives making decisions. But we also look at that really critical interdisciplinary expert committee in the middle, where science and technology experts will come together from all the regions of the world. And we think about coverage there to make the panel an actual success. Those words are in the documents at the moment. Those words are being broad, multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary. They're in there, and we would like to make sure they stay in there so that there's an open door to accessing all of the world's experts that are relevant, that need to be accessed by that particular committee. So that whole concept about the people on the IEC who are nominated and appointed to that committee having access to the best science experts. Another key issue that is really strong in the civil society discussions is this point about conflict of interest and managing that really well from the start. That may not be in the foundational document, and it may not need to be. So there's some things that we can look to discussing in more detail once the first governing body meets, once the plenary meets, and that's one of them, the conflict of interest process. Now, as long as it's in there somewhere, everybody will be happy from the civil society discussions that we've had to date. If it was written out, then I think that would be something that the civil society community may not think is acceptable. So let's hope that those two documents still seek to want a conflict of interest process being put in place, and we think it will. So really, just to finish, we do want to really see, as Hudi said from the start, that culture of transparency and openness in this whole process, so that then the outputs and the reports will be trusted by as many governments and societies around the world as possible. And so we will be calling for that when we're in Uruguay, when we meet together in person, and look forward really to that spirit of positivity and optimism that is being displayed so far, that this can actually be agreed. Looking at the legal text, it does seem possible. That's what we think from the science and technology community. It's possible, it's nearly there. So if the will is there from the members of the governments that attend, the political will is there, then as scientists, we are ready to respond to whatever the panel will need going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Camilla, for the both sort of bird's eye view and the very nitty-gritty specifics of what we can expect. And for next, I will hand it over to Lynn Jacobs, doctoral candidate at McGill University and policy advisor with Indigenous Leadership Initiative. Lynn, you have the floor.
Thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Goet Denues. My English name is Lynn Jacobs. I'm from Kahnawake, which is an indigenous community of the Kanien'kehá:ka Nation, located near Montreal and also where I'm speaking to you from today. Thank you so much to the Children and Youth Major Group for the invitation. I'm very happy to hear about all your great work and proposals in this process. And thank you also for the opportunity to share some perspectives from the Indigenous peoples who participate in this process as rights holders to create the Science Policy Panel on Chemicals, Waste, and Pollution Prevention. As we mentioned in our Indigenous Peoples Major Group submission on the working documents for the upcoming meetings, Indigenous peoples are disproportionately affected by chemicals, waste, and pollution in our territories. This Science Policy Panel is vitally important to our communities, which are too often on the front lines of pollution from industrial activities and developments that contaminate our lands, waters, wild foods, and medicines. Contamination impacts our health, social and spiritual well-being, food sovereignty and livelihoods, as well as our capacity and our right to intergenerational knowledge transmission in a clean and safe environment. Many of us are also participating in the plastics treaty negotiations due to the disproportionate impacts that our communities face at all stages of the plastic life cycle, from fossil fuel extraction through to disposal and widespread dispersal in the natural environment. This science policy panel will be important for the scientific assessments related to plastic pollution, and we hope that this link will be clarified and strengthened in the foundational documents of the panel. I would like to mention some reflections from the previous open-ended working group session and present some expectations and hopes for the upcoming resumed third session. The main concern that we noted is the lack of formal assurances that the Science Policy Panel will uphold the rights of Indigenous peoples as enshrined in the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Text affirming this commitment must be included in the foundational document and mainstream throughout the panel processes. An equally important concern is the lack of convergence demonstrated at the last session regarding the participation of Indigenous peoples in the interdisciplinary expert committee. The resolution for the establishment of this panel put forward the responsibility to ensure that the Science Policy Panel has inclusive participation, including Indigenous peoples. Further, Article 18 of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples states that Indigenous peoples have the right to participate in decision-making in matters which would affect their rights through representatives chosen by themselves in accordance with their own procedures. In addition to this enshrined right, Indigenous peoples are the experts of our own knowledge systems and Indigenous science. As mentioned, as any mentions of Indigenous knowledge in the panel documents lack context and meaning without the full and effective participation of Indigenous peoples who are the experts of that knowledge. If the Science Policy Panel is to be truly representative as called for in the resolution, the rights of Indigenous peoples, protections for Indigenous knowledge systems, including science, and the full and effective participation of Indigenous peoples must be assured and mainstreamed throughout the subsidiary bodies, committees, and assessments. Other reflections from colleagues who attended the last session includes concerns regarding the politicization of the negotiations and the efforts of some states to secure consensus as an operating principle of the panel. We see this as highly problematic and not appropriate for a scientific body. As we are seeing in the plastics treaty negotiations, a consensus process can enable low ambition states to delay or prevent action on issues that are impacting Indigenous peoples and other frontline and fence-line communities. Scientific assessments and urgent action are required to address the chemicals, waste, and pollution crises. These issues must be resolved in a way that does not delay the important work of the future panel. Looking forward to the upcoming meetings in Uruguay, myself and other Indigenous relatives will be present to call on the ad hoc open-ended working group to ensure that the future Science Policy Panel upholds the rights of Indigenous peoples as enshrined in the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, with text affirming this commitment in the panel documents. We also call on the open-ended working group to provide for a minimum of 2 seats in the interdisciplinary expert committee specifically for Indigenous experts, and to establish an Indigenous advisory committee to advise on nominations of Indigenous experts and on the mainstreaming of the rights, knowledge, and full and effective participation of Indigenous peoples in the Science Policy Panel processes. Without the assurance of this participation, the new Science Policy Panel risks further marginalizing the very communities most impacted by chemicals, waste, and pollution. The upcoming resumed third session of the open-ended working group provides a critical opportunity for member states to demonstrate their commitment to environmental justice and Indigenous rights. Nyawat Goa, thank you, and I look forward to working with you all in Uruguay to make this meeting a success.
Thank you so much, Lynn. And as a final speaker on this part of the webinar, I'd like to welcome Chinky Pelino Goye, Regional Coordinator for Southeast and East Asia Region at IPAN and Regional Facilitator for Asia Pacific for the major group.
Thank you so much to the organizers of this important webinar, for another great opportunity to share how civil society can help contribute to global environmental governance. And for this webinar, I will be sharing some perspectives on how civil society, including the youth, can participate in the future science policy panel. The SPP negotiations have progressed from OEWG 1 to OEWG 3. Civil society, including the youth, has been present in every step of the way, and we've contributed our perspectives, pushed for ambition, and called for a truly inclusive and transparent process. We were able to provide our inputs and interventions in the negotiations. And I agree with Camila by saying that I've also witnessed how CYMG has been very active in the OEWG meetings. And as we now transition towards the establishment of the panel, it is essential to ensure continued and meaningful civil society participation from OEWG 3.2 through the intersessional process leading up to the first meeting of the governing body. This phase will lay the groundwork of how inclusive, accountable, and effective the panel will ultimately become. The SPP offers a historic opportunity to embed environmental justice, intergenerational equity, and intercultural responsibility into global environmental governance. And civil society organizations, we're not just advocates, we are researchers, we are community scientists or citizen scientists, as I also call it, and also policy contributors. We identify pollution hotspots, generate data, expose risks, and co-develop evidence to inform decisions. Our participation ensures that the panel is grounded in real-world impacts and community realities, especially in the global. Me, I'm coming from a developing region that is among the most affected by pollution, and I've seen how civil society generates policy-relevant data through citizen science and community organizing. So let me just share with you some concrete examples. Like, for example, in the Philippines, an NGO leads community-based watershed monitoring to inform land use planning and also protect water resources. In Thailand, another NGO documents industrial pollution through sampling air, water, and also soil, and empowering regulators to respond. In Indonesia, another NGO helps communities measure toxic exposures and push for regulatory reforms, and a lot more. And other NGOs across Asia Pacific are also helping monitor toxic chemicals in consumer products and have been calling on the government to act. And globally, civil society is already shaping international processes and have directly influenced treaty negotiations and national regulatory reforms. Now, this shows how grassroots-driven science and advocacy can achieve global impact. These contributions are not peripheral, so they are central to advancing scientific understanding and policy action. Now, more importantly, meaningful and inclusive participation by civil society builds public trust and transparency in the panel's output, so making its recommendations more credible and widely supported. So just some of the recommendations for the upcoming OEWG. So first, we call for the institutionalization of inclusive participation, so establishing formal and then the ongoing roles of civil society, including the youth, through advisory groups, observer mechanisms, and co-creation platforms. Second, I also agree with Lynn Jacobs, the need for upholding intergenerational and intercultural responsibility. Third, ensuring participation in the intersessional process. We are hoping that spaces will be created for civil society and youth inputs during the lead up to the first governing body meeting to shape the panel's foundational design. Of course, we are also calling for more support for participation from the Global South. Next is also call for recognition of citizen science as legitimate evidence. Our frontline communities are not just recipient of the impacts of pollution. They can also contribute in data gathering and also development and implementation of solutions. Ensure transparency and public access. guarantee open access to data, documents, and decision-making processes representation. And yeah, guarantee civil society representation across all SPP bodies. So this is important to ensure transparency, credibility, equitable access, and trustworthiness of the work of the panel and its inputs. And this is already an established practice in all chemicals and waste-related conventions, including the Stockholm, Rotterdam, Basel, and Minamata subsidiary bodies. So in conclusion, I just want to say that civil society participation is not optional. It is essential. Our involvement enhances the legitimacy, transparency, and effectiveness of the Science Policy Panel, and we urge this body to recognize civil society as co-creators of knowledge and ensure full and effective participation in shaping a safer, more just, and sustainable future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sinki. And yeah, I would like to reiterate on that last point about civil society participation as being not optional, but essential. And I think with today's webinar, we are really driving that point home. And now I think we would like to move on to the last part of this webinar. The last part of this webinar will be a panel discussion. And this panel discussion seeks to highlight best practices in how early career professionals can contribute to global science policy platforms, and to present best practices from different science policy interfaces. And we have 3 panelists joining us today. I'll introduce the panelists one by one, and if it's okay for the panelists to come in on camera. The first panelist is Tariq Al-Harouzi, PhD candidate at Imperial College London and GEO7 fellow. Our second panelist is Mulako Kabisa, PhD candidate, at Global Change Institute at the University of the Witwatersrand and IPCC PhD fellow. And Adla Parvik, co-founder and vice president of the Center for Marine and Freshwater Biology and national focal point for Bosnia and Herzegovina for UNCBD and ITBES. Tariq and Adla, if you're available to turn on your cameras. Thank you very much. And we are running a little bit out of time. We are running a bit over on time. So if it's okay to keep your responses succinct and to the point so that we can get hopefully 2 rounds of questions for each of you. And the first round of questions will be directed at all of you in a general manner on why early career engagements matter in these global science policy interfaces. And I'll pass the floor first to Tariq.
Yeah, thanks everyone. I hope you can hear me smoothly. I would say if I'm gonna talk about my own experience, I started back as a reviewer in Geo6, and I have been exposed to this intense information and details and how youth can play a role in that. Then I started as a fellow with GS7, and I'm working with multiple agencies around, and I start to get all this information, and I can see how I can play a role. If I reflect back even to the opening of today's sessions, the amount of information, the amount of the fundamental details we know about it, I know all these directions, it's going towards like to have more a greener, more sustainable, more futuristic planet the way we want to see. But at the end, what is the young professional playing a role into that? When we say like early career scientists, how we are taking a long-term impact into those directions. So even when we talk about the capacity building, like what is our policy space we have, what can make all that capacity more of a stronger, making a diverse, let's say, impact towards that direction. The involvement, okay, more as a youth, or even from my experience, I can see we played as observers, contributors to various events and reports, but still the youth-led organization, how it's gonna change towards that, where we are heading. So I feel like most of these platforms through GEO, IBCCs, and IBBS, or even today, this kind of event, where we are heading, I think all these platforms plays a role in building the capacity of the scientific, I mean, of the early career researchers. I would say that's what I'm aiming for, and even I can see where we are heading forward.
Thanks, Tariq. And to Molako, the same question, why early career engagement matters in these platforms.
Hi, everyone, thanks for the opportunity to speak. Because this next, so we're going to be in charge of the important process, and understanding what to do, how it is, and how you can engage is really important to start from a very early stage so that we can meaningfully contribute to the process. So, for example, I'm an IPCC PhD fellow right now, and they're funding my work, and all this happened very serendipitously. I first was exposed to our Common Future and the Climate Change Conference when I was still doing my master's program in 2015. And that's how I got to know that this is what IPCC does. And from there, I was able to participate as a youth delegate when they were trying to draft the sixth assessment report from the fifth, and they wanted youth involvement. So because most of us are at the frontier of knowledge, we're master's students, even as an undergrad and PhD students, you're in touch with the literature, you understand what's going on, and you're more likely than somebody who's much more grounded in the processes to have more radical ideas about what we can do to make things change. And so I think that meaningfully engaging the youth, not just as a token, but more seriously about more creative problem solving, is something that I think is a really important step that we need to take. Currently, I'm a lead author with GEO7, and really having a fresh perspective about how do we talk about nature, how do we talk about the planetary crisis, because this is my future we're talking about. So I'm much more engaged about what is next, what can we do to make things work. And so I think that a very explicit way that we can do that is being able to show the youth how to go about that process, because being at the right place, knowing the right people at the right time, all these things need to match in order for the youth to really be meaningfully engaged. People don't know what they don't know. And so I think that it's important for you that accessible and to let that it is possible that this sort of thing can happen and you can participate, not just for very well established long career scientists, but even at the beginning, it is possible for that to happen. So I think that's why it's important for the youth to be engaged.
Thank you so much. And Adla, the same question to you on why youth engagement matters on these platforms.
Thank you. It's truly an honor to be a part of this important panel conversation alongside inspiring early career scientists from programs like GEO and IPCC fellowship, because I believe it's a good option to hear all of them, because this is the direction where we are moving forward. And I also had the opportunity to be a part of IPES fellowship in the program of transformative change. And I can say that we're certain that these fellowships are not just opportunities for learning, but they are powerful entry points into the real decision-making spaces. Participating in these programs, like I was in the IPES fellowship, helps young professionals to understand how science policy platform its function, and from the inside, how decisions are shaped, and most important, how our voices can help transform this system. So from the science to the policy. And we had the opportunity to be at a plenary as also, not only to create, let's say, the assessment and so on. And I have seen that how young professionals bring energy, adaptability, and deep commitment to addressing these interconnected challenges of our time, let's say. And it allows to connect our knowledge, our local knowledge, with global frameworks. And personally, my involvement in biodiversity research and policy is at both national and international levels. And currently, I also become the national focal point for IPES and the CBD, and I officially negotiate on behalf of my country at meetings, at a COP. And let's say it's a good option to include in this way also persons that are young like me, who have that will, who want to be commitment. And I believe that's a really good strategy for all countries to include young people who really wants to bring the difference in the country, to connect with other people from the other countries and create that network. For example, IPES, once you finish that assessment, there's alumni, and that all IPES fellows are connected together, and we are looking to bring those changes in our countries on the global.
Thanks so much, Hadla. And just as a reminder, if you have any questions, to please put it in the Q&A chat, so that we might have time for 1 or 2 questions at the end. I'll take it back to Tariq, and maybe, so you were a Geo6 reviewer and then now working as a fellow. If you can speak to some of the gaps in the engagement of early career professionals in these global science policy interface processes, and perhaps how these gaps can be addressed. Tariq, are you still here with us?
I'm here. Could you say it one more time? Just
Yes, just if you can speak to the gaps in engaging early career professionals and scientists, and what avenues can be, how can we keep the avenues more open for more early career professionals and for more diverse voices of early career professionals to be involved in these global science policy interfaces?
if I reflect on that, I would say maybe creating kind of a formal youth advisory group that we can directly report to the bureau or the secretariat. Other one could be even offering the fellowship or even kind of funding traineeship or early career scientist kind of at a regional level. That could also be something I would really appreciate if we have it around. Or even maybe we don't need to exist a new venues rather than just like collaborate with the existed ones, like similar with the major group for children or youth, or let's say with the CYMG, or there are a lot of them out there. And I would say that's, so I don't want to take over the time. I would say those kind of the thing I believe can take us towards whatever we are looking for. So I would say if I can shortlist those into like 3 points, maybe it could be if we have kind of institutional mechanism, or we have kind of a certain capacity or access to certain organization or networks, or and at the end I can say partnership. Like if I didn't know about Geo6 and I played as a reviewer, I'll not be today playing a role as fellow, and I'm going after being and taking a lead as authorship. Yeah, I hope it's clear.
Yes, for sure, that's very clear. And then I'll take it to Mulako. You talked about being at the right place at the right time, and how this has led to opportunities with the IPCC and with IPES, with the IPCC and GEO processes. If you can speak to how can we make sure that more early career professionals and scientists are at the right place at the right time, and how can opportunities, information about these opportunities, be more equitably communicated to more diverse voices of early career professionals?
I think one of the ways that can happen is a more direct engagement with academic institutions. Like I'm at the Global Change Institute, and within my institute, there are people there who've been coordinating lead authors within the IPCC. And so it's because of my interactions with them that I was able to know about the availability of a fellowship and all that. And even when I was doing my master's, one of my supervisors was with IPES. And it is from her that I knew that I tailor my work and my research in priority areas that are of interest to IPBES and the IPCC. And it's for that reason that I was able to do both of that. And even knowing about GEO to be a lead author was from my supervisor, who was part of IPBES, part of IPCC, and told me they're looking for authors and your work is directly related to what IPBES is doing. They want people who are more knowledgeable in this subject area that you are in. And so you can from early on, I was able to tailor my research, my decisions around what kind of research I'd been with what are known gaps from these big intergovernmental institutions. And so I think for young people, that is a clear entry point. They want rigor, they want people who've got the knowledge, who are the scientists, but sometimes you just do research for the sake of research when you're younger because you don't know any better. But being able to be exposed to what the knowledge gaps are can help you tailor what your knowledge is in order to be incorporated into this sort of space. Academic institutions, and I worked in a think tank, and also engagements in those sorts of places where lots of young people working is a clear way that you can have the expertise and have people exposed to that sort of knowledge that this is what's possible, this is what you can do, and this is how you can tailor your research to fill these big gaps that are currently not well represented. And in terms of, I come from the global south, obviously, and you sometimes think that there's no space for you, but I was able to find a lot of these opportunities from social media, interestingly, and being able to know how to look for the right sorts of resources and just taking a chance and knowing that as long as you have the knowledge, you can apply. I mean, the worst that could happen is a no, but being able to apply, learning from the process, and you get a number of rejections and knowing that that's okay, but also still being given the opportunity and taking it up, and also having the confidence to do it. That even though I might not be a career scientist, I'm at the beginning, there's still an opportunity to be engaged in many different ways. So I think that's how that can happen to help it be a more inclusive process and to also help young people start to think about the trajectory of where they want to go next by looking at the gaps.
Thank you so much. And the last question to Adla. You talked about how when you're in these spaces, you have the opportunity to shape decisions from the inside. If you can share a couple of best practices once you are able to get into these spaces, how can young professionals really take advantage of the opportunity, of the full breadth of the opportunity to really influence the decisions from the inside, and share some of the best practices that you've seen in youth engagement in helping to engage these young professionals so that they can contribute to the best of their abilities?
Yes, thanks. So definitely, let's say that inclusion it's more effective and it's more institutionalized. But let's say how my journey begins. Definitely, we always have ad hoc invitation, occasional youth representation. And it's something good for entrance, let's say. But if we want to make a long-term let's say engagement of you in this process, then we definitely need to make the institutionalization in this way. This is actually how I started to be engaged, to volunteer, to help him in any way, like long time ago, to help them and to try in any way just include some parts that let's say where the voice of youth will be heard. So I think that is really important. And when I said the institutionalization, so it's very important that like if we have the platform to have the mentorship programs, to have a junior expert positions, we can see that we often skip those junior expert positions. I'm like skipping from the point like from my country and so on. Usually they ask for the senior positions or someone who is experienced, and then you are really struggling to grow yourself, to be successful in your career and to have career behind you, let's say like that. So I think it's very important to create the space and opportunities for youth so we can learn. It's not a problem. We can have those mentorship programs, we can have the junior expert positions. Then also we need to have the role in the technical bodies as well. So and then you can connect with the people with the same mindset to create a small network in your community, to start to work on some project, to get those references, so you can make the impact in the local community. Then you can bring those results to the government, to the institution. So it's very important to create a team with a similar mindset and to move forward together in order to make some changes, and also to feel that journey when you are involved in the decisions.
Thank you so much, Adla, and thank you so much to all three of you for the wonderful contributions. I think it's very inspirational and aspirational for those young career professionals who are looking to be in these spaces and to engage more from a more decision-making and participatory lens. And we have 4 minutes left, so I think we have about time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. I don't think I've seen one in the Q&A or the chat as of yet, though I do see some good comments coming in about other sort of best practices in terms of youth engagement from a participatory lens. So if there are any questions, if you could please place it in the chat or the Q&A box, then we can, and also please direct it to the panelists that you would like to have the question answered. And I believe that we also do have some of the panelists, most of the panelists from all of the previous sections of the webinar who are able to answer questions. So maybe I'll give it just maybe 1 more minute if anyone has a question. All right, I don't see any questions coming up on the chat or the Q&A box, but I believe the lines are open definitely to CYMG to answer any further questions that you may have arising from the webinar, to direct the questions to us. And I believe the other panelists will also be able to answer. If you leave them in the chat box and I've missed them, we can also direct them after the webinar to the relevant panelists. All right, I don't see any questions, so I think we will close the webinar for today here. I'd like to thank all our wonderful panelists for sharing your expertise and your viewpoints, and especially what you look forward to with this upcoming resumed 3rd session of the open-ended working group and the establishment of the science policy panel. I'd like to thank the Secretariat for your continued support I actually see. Oh, okay. Richard, you've put a question earlier. I'm unfortunately not seeing it, so do you mind sending it again? Yes, if you can just type your question into the chat box. All right, I'll continue with the thanks while this question may be coming forward. So yes, thank you to the Secretariat for the continued engagement of supporting the engagement of civil society and of children and youth in the processes. And also thank you to the Geneva Environment Network for their support in facilitating this webinar, but in general with the processes, and also to all of the attendees for coming in today and to listening to all the important viewpoints. I think the sort of my main key takeaway from the panel is that from this webinar today is that civil society participation and children and youth participation are again not optional. They are an absolutely necessary part of the establishment of the panel to make sure that the work of the panel remains grounded in local realities and that the outcomes of the panel continue to serve the communities who are on the front lines affected by the issues that the panel seeks to serve. And so with that today, I will close the webinar and wish you all the good rest of your days and good rest of your evenings. So thank you everyone for joining and we hope to see you again very soon.